Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Uh, hello. Uh, this is David Sayce and Simon Marshall. We are live streaming across LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you for everyone who is watching us from the very beginning or watching the recording. So once again, it's myself and Simon, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about user intent when it comes to marketing within the law firms. First of all, Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Simon Marshall. I founded TBD Marketing 3 years ago, next month, I think, and work predominantly for law firms on their digital marketing, and also as a kind of CMO more broadly for smaller firms. But I've got 20 years working in the legal sector in a variety of different comms, marketing, and business development roles. So that's me.
That's great. And I'm David Sayce. I'm a digital marketing consultant, an SEO consultant. Worked a lot within professional services and B2B over the last 20 odd years, a long time. Also, the last 10 years or so, sometime with the legal sector as well, including a couple of the larger London law firms. We've already got some comments coming in from some of the people watching. Hello, Simon, and thank you for watching. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to type those in, and we will do our best to answer them. But yeah, so Simon, user intent. What does it mean for you?
Because you're the phrase, isn't it? User intent.
Yeah, and it comes from a number of different sources. I mean, with my side on the digital, the web, the SEO, a lot of it is perhaps around the keyword side, but that's not perhaps the whole story.
No, I think you've probably nailed something immediately there, haven't you? That's going to be important for us to think about and discuss. But I think, I mean, if we just called it intent and stop calling people users, that might help, right? And I think that helps a bit because it's not some arbitrary, third party over there kind of thing. It's just, what does this person want to achieve? What does this person want to do? And if we think about people's intent, your intent, my intent, when we're doing something, that's a really important way of going about creating our marketing materials. I think it just comes down to the intent part of it rather than the user part of it.
I mean, especially with the law firms at the moment, do you think this is an area that perhaps isn't touched on as much as it should be? Do you think the legal sector is getting better at understanding the intent of those potential clients and those clients coming through?
Such a good question. I don't know if I can call the kind of behaviors of a multi-billion-pound industry all in one go, but I would certainly say that there are some firms who've rightly declared themselves as customer-centric, who have moved to a model where they think, well, what is it that this person wants to do next or wants to achieve by doing this thing, which is frankly I would say that's ex-PR, but I think that's what PRs do all the time. They think, what does the audience think and what do we care about them? And there's a really lovely guy I know here from Bristol called David Slolly said to me once, what do they know before they come to you, and what do you want them to know after they leave? And it's, what do you want them to do or know afterwards? And I think that the middle bit of that is you start out with their intent, you hopefully help progress them to where you need them to be or they want to be, or meet their intent, and that's really the meat of it. Now I'm going to answer your question a bit differently, because you said to me, like, how well are the law firms doing it? And I want to move beyond digital for a minute, because it's just marketing at the end of the day. All of it is just marketing at the end of the day. And I think that law firms are incredibly good at this in some ways. Some people's intent, like, I want to do X, is well served by lots of things that law firms already do. So I want to network with my peers. I want to spend time going to a rugby match and chatting to my lawyer at some length and really having a deep discussion so we know each other, X and Y, Z. So there are some things that, it's easy to decry in the age of digital marketing. It's easy to decry, as a result of several other areas, budget or just whether or not they're exclusive to kind of white men, as it were. But I think that there are things that take place already within law firms that are incredibly powerful in terms of looking after people's intent as well, right? So if we think of those, a day at the cricket, David, if you and I go to the cricket, right? So we're going to get there and it's going to be, let's go to Lords, right? So we're strolling up from the
I was hoping for Edgbaston, but I'll let you go.
Right, let's go to Edgbaston. Why not? My mum used to teach near Edgbaston, so that feels natural for me. She's at St Philip's down the road, and so we're going along, to Edgbaston, and as we're strolling there, you and I are, pleasantries are first, and we've got that picnic thing, and we know what we're doing, and we get there, and we get in, and even if I don't know you that well, we have a bit of time with each other. Now, I think that you can hold it together for about an hour and a half of those conversations where you're, the formalities there, and the kind of, how are you, and it's all fine. But I think that the reason people take people to the cricket, and it's a great metaphor for our other marketing as well, is because around the tea time break, right, the real juice of it, the truth of it will come out, right? How's David really feeling about how he's doing this business? What's he really up to? What are his concerns? What are the real drivers to him? You can't hide after that period of time. And it's a metaphor. We can't do it in a COVID era. It's not always appropriate for all of our clients to take them all to the cricket, but it's just using that example to show there's an arc behind there, and the intent of that person, for you, maybe in that first hour and a half, is to kind of, survive this slightly awkward conversation where you don't really know the person you go to the cricket with, and then over lunchtime, it's like, well, my intent is to get fed. But after that, it's to have let's talk. What's going on in the market, this that, and then the tea time shift is really about this deeper kind of intent of, I think you might know some things about the market, and I really want to pick your brains about it, whatever, right? I don't know the answers, you'll notice, because I'm very careful not to make assumptions about what your intent are. But you'll give me signals, David, along the way. And so in our marketing sense of, that kind of activity, and that could be a 12-month campaign, not a day at the cricket. It could be a mixture of print, press, digital, and whatever it might be. But we should always be mindful. We talk about audience a lot of the time. Right? All of us, who's the audience? That's great. But that only takes us part of the way there. You tell me, it must be your experience. I would say, what's the state of mind of that audience at this point in time? And why are we assuming that it's the same as it was 2 hours ago, yesterday, last week, whatever it might be? They're just not. Things happen. Our moods change. Our circumstances change. And intent is about serving. Let's think of one of our specific services, litigation, right? Very hard to market litigation, a lot of people will tell you. And I think what you're going to do is keep showing up consistently over an extended period.
Yeah.
And at the exact moment in which somebody's intent is, I need to do something about this, I need to, dispute my way through this, right? You'll be there waiting, compassionate, empathetic, ready to go, right? But the thing you've had to do is show up again and again. But when they declare their intent somehow, we'll talk about that in a bit more depth, you've got to be ready to act as well. I know that's a rambling introduction, but hopefully I didn't want it to be limited to this. Not that you would ever do that anyway, because I think you're very good at looking beyond your deep expertise, but you also know how you sit in the broader sense of what you do. And I'd like to think I do the same as well with marketing.
Well, I think, from my background, it's always been about the firm, the business, and the end results as well. And intent is absolutely key to that. In fact, was in a conversation yesterday talking about pitching and how vital the intent is. You need to understand exactly what they're there for. As you say, it covers so much of the journey. And you talk about the change of intent, and it's interesting. We see that quite a lot from the online side. Google, the search engines, they're not static, and even with them there's the natural evolution, but then you get the seasonal changes that impact intent. You have changes in the environment. I think one of the ones that I saw, one of the more recent ones I've seen, was with the terrible fire at Notre Dame. Right. And before then, depending on where you were in the world, you'd get different sorts of results. But it was interesting to see in the US, Notre Dame is often basketball, it's university. And it was interesting to see how the results changed on the same word, on the same phrase, down to this change of what was happening in the world. And that was Google trying to understand intent as well, which is where it comes quite interesting.
Google's very good at it. I think they move very quickly to understand. Do you remember do you remember that awful tweet that was sent a few years ago? I wrote stuff about it by Janine Sacco. Do you remember? She was the PR woman who she issued a tweet that a lot of people would have said was very racist. I mean, it was, as far as I could tell as well. But she, let's fast forward to the end. She quit her job, right, as a PR woman. But she gets on a plane, right? So she basically goes radio silence after doing this racist tweet.
Because she literally she sent the tweet,
yes,
and turned off her phone for the 12-hour flight.
Yes, that she was going to Africa as well. So listen, what happens though was that Google spotted that people started to do a web search for Janine Sacco, and initially it would serve up her LinkedIn and serve up her Twitter profile, and that was in the days, actually, David, I think, when Google used to show you tweets in its results. Doesn't do that anymore. But then the engineers thought, well, look, this is getting some serious traffic here. The first result was actually to show where she was on her flight. Okay, I don't know if you remember that, but the Google guys were so alive to it. Now, look, we're not Google. We don't have the power that those guys have got to turn things on a dime and do something like that. So they understood, though, that what the audience, the baying crowd, really wanted to know is, when's this woman going to land? Because they were waiting for this awful car crash to happen, to when she was going to have to basically. She didn't know that the world knew that she had to quit her job, and it was just awful to kind of spot it happen. But the intent side of things, I'm not worried about the politics of what she did and didn't do. I think she's since recovered and apologized profusely for the things that she did as well. Right, good on her for doing that. But in those points that our intent changed as the news story went on, Google reacted to it. And my question would be, does your law firm do so? Right? Does your professional services firm do so as we go along? Not just in some fixed mindset way of, we think we've got that intent nailed. Right? That's always going to go badly, by the way. Right?
Yeah.
But actually, are we even alive to it in the context of what's happening now? I was thinking ahead of today's webinar of a very specific example for you, David, and it is based in language. It's a nitpick of mine, but a lot of people say, why is X and Y and Z, when they mean, how is it X and Y and Z?
Yeah.
Right? Why is that the case? When they really mean, why is that the case? How is that the case, right? See, I'm confusing myself now. But if we programmatically designed all of our marketing to answer one of those questions, but didn't serve it against the other question, right? We're not serving the majority of the audience's intent, I would suggest. So, for example, you and I have seen enough of this in the past, but the obsession with calling ourselves real estate when no one searches for the phrase real estate, if you're doing property law, right, is a really good example of where you just say, well, look, what does our target audience, the people we're going for, what do they call it? And everybody's gut instinct is they all call it real estate because we call it real estate. Yeah. Right? But actually, if you go and look at the data of it, even those people who are in the I'm going to call it property sector for the right reasons, right? Even those people who are in the property sector still call it the property sector a lot of the time, right? And so, it's a really good example of where we have to look at language and what the intent is behind what we're doing. We've got to serve the right kind of content to people depending on what they want from the other way. Now, it does, institutional versus personal does seem to split broadly from real estate to property. Not always.
I just thought I'd throw that comment up from Jason.
It's not Simon's bedroom, Jason. Okay, and welcome to the. I mean, I'm 47 years old. I don't have my own unicorn. The unicorn has been adopted as something of a special emblem for the last few months, Jason, though, because broadcasting for me has brought a lot of good luck on the business for the last few months. So I will retain the right to hijack my daughter's bedroom. David's got just as much flowery stuff in the wall. It's just not as
yeah. This is the spare bedroom and the curtains that were
now.
Here.
What is Jason's intent behind writing? Right? Well, exactly. You see, right? Is he attempting to disrupt the process? Is he just trying to have a laugh with a friend? What's he trying to do? I don't know all the answers to that, but it's something that we have to think about when we come to react to kind of those situations when they come along as well. So,
but I think it's fascinating you mention about how the phrases are used internally rather than the external environment, and this is something that I think is still quite an issue within legal and actually the wider professional services as well. But I found with a number of the law firms that I've worked with, there was a number of issues around that. It was, first of all, the determination that this must be called, in your example, real estate property. Yeah. It sounds too cheap, but it's what people are searching for.
Well, there's a funny phrase there, isn't it, David? You can say you can either be right or you can be happy. Which do you want to be? Right?
Yeah.
It's a binary choice in life. And I think that with a lot of that web stuff, you can either be right about what you want to call it, or you can have loads of traffic. Which do you want?
That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
I mean, it comes down to, let's go back to intent. Traffic means views, means button clicks, means leads, means conversions, means money. So you can be all right about it if you want, and there's a lot of that out there, and I'm not sure that's the world needs any more of at the moment. Or it can have an audience that says, my intent wasn't met. I didn't get to find what I wanted because the firm insisted on writing it in a way that was appropriate for its audience, not for me. So somebody yesterday, I put some headings into a piece, David, that I'd written, and they were written as questions that you or I would type them. I mean, I don't want to give all away the tricks of trade, but if people should be doing this in their blogs nowadays, and it's no secret to know that you should be doing that in what's called H2s in your blog pages, because Google loves it. So for today's
well structured data.
Exactly, right. You know more about that than I do, but I think of it as an ex-journalist, you think of it as a tech, and when we work together on it, we're going to produce a great result. And that's how the marketing department should work, by the way, is you have somebody who can write and understands the audience, does these things, and the data structure guy going, well, look, if we did things this way, we'll actually produce a better result. So look, what you do in your blog is you say, everybody knows this now anyway, you can Google the question that you're going to answer today, what is the nature of user intent, and then we think of 10 questions underneath it. Well, Google tells us people also asked, right? And because a lot of its work now is on related subject matter, Google rewards that with a lot of juice. If you put the answers to those questions on your page, and if you're working in a law firm and the partner says, I want to hold the pen on this, I don't want to change the format of my piece, here's one easy thing you can do today. You go, no, why would I want to change your brilliantly written? I'm not going to do that. But would you mind if we just add an FAQ to the bottom of the page? And they'll be like, well, okay, that sounds great. And the FAQs, as David knows full well, are the structured data that Google loves, because when it spots someone's written in the first person, how do I X? So you mustn't put it over in the third person, in-house lawyers or they or something over there. It's not going to be over there. It's going to be like you've got to empathize with the user. And if you're a client-centric so-called law firm, everyone's declaring themselves to be, then it will show up because you say in their own words, in natural users' words, how do I do X? When should I do X? Why is it important that I do X? Right? Answer those questions on the page. Google spots them because you've put them in the heading 2. Can't use heading 1. That's at the top of the page.
And with the FAQ, actually, this is actually where the structured data and the technical side comes in. So using the schema side, FAQ and how-tos are being picked up very well by Google at the moment.
Can you tell us a bit more about that? How do people go about doing that? Is it easy to do?
Generally, it is pretty easy, even from a non or basic technical side. So if you have, let's say, a WordPress website, which I know a lot of firms use, there's a very good chance you might be using Yoast. They have actually a lot of schema built into that plugin, and straight there when you're putting the copy together onto the CMS, onto WordPress itself, there's the little layout buttons there for FAQs, and it just makes sure that nice question and that succinct answer are properly tagged up. And the hope is then when somebody searches for something close to that term, if you've done it well, if you've done it better than everyone else, and in a way Google likes it and it's correct, there's that great chance again, that featured snippet area at the top, which is always great as well. And I've seen this with some of my own work on some of my personal websites, and it's fascinating to see. It used to be called position 0. It sits above the number 1 spot. It can be quite an eye catcher. It's nothing's above the adverts. But it's interesting. I think I did one on number of tweets a day, and I had the featured snippet there. I'm not too sure if I still do, but it's fascinating to see because it just catches the eye straight away, and it lends you a little bit of authority there as well. I think now they've appreciated it a little bit more recently. But still, I think the whole FAQ and the way it shows up in the results on a search engine is so useful especially when it comes back to that intent. I think, I was going to mention about something like will writing. For those firms that deal with that. I mean, the intent of, well, I'm just getting started. What is a will? Do I need one? To the more complex areas of it and changing it and amending it. The various levels of intent just around a sort of simple topic like that are quite interesting. And as you rightly say, you just go online and start typing some of those questions into Google, and you often get that people also asked box, or there's software out there that can also help as well.
There's a website, isn't it, called
also asked,
that you mentioned previously.
I can't. Oh God, I was just on his blog page the other day.
What, Neil Patel?
No. I think it's Mark Williams Cook. I can't remember. But it's absolutely also ask.com, absolutely fabulous. It works the back end of Google through the API, pulls in all that information, saves you the time of trawling through it yourself. You get a whole load of data to look through, and it is great for the content creation. Focusing on intent.
Move back up a level for those people who might not be like techie people, right? And just to remind ourselves, so we go to Google because we haven't got someone that we know that we can ask the question of. Right?
Yeah.
So if we had already informed the broader world with TV advertising or PR, whatever it might be, that we know the answer to that question, then people wouldn't necessarily turn to Google for it, right? So the assumption, therefore, is that it's not that stuff, right? So just remember that, because there is an intent before it, which is that I could ring David and go, David, I trust you on this thing. I'm not going to even Google the question. I know you'll know the answer, right? So we've already hived off I think, a lot of those queries, David. A lot of intent is already dealt with there. Now, what David's highlighted is that if you get this stuff right and structure right on your website, it's just one example, but let's do digital from there. If you get it structured on the website, then Google will reward it. But what happens next is it used to reward you by giving you it's called a snippet at the top. Now, it used to give you that, but it also gave you one of the positions at the top, like position 1 below the adverts, right, and below the break, right? Now they've started saying you only get the snippet, right? The thing then is you've served your purpose in relation to that query, because you've told them well, potentially, and this is what I want to give you a real nugget. If you've served that query, like David says, how do I legally witness a will? Right? Let's say somebody's going to ask the question. They are going to ask that question, and it's been really pertinent for the last year when people didn't know how to do it through glass or through a car window and all this kind of stuff. Right? Very inventive things have happened. So people are going to ask that question. But if your web page that sits beneath it in the URL is called, how do I witness a will? Right? Which we would all encourage you, by the way, digital marketers to have done previously. Right? Then the person reading it, Google's phraseology, a user, might then think, yeah, but now what's my intent? Now I know that piece of information. My intent has changed because I've learned what you've told me about it. Now my intent has changed. So I'm thinking, David, you're going to probably shoot me down in flames from an SEO perspective, but I'm going to suggest the top 10 questions people ask in relation to wills as a URL, if you're rewarded with a snippet on how do I legally sign a will, is more likely to be clicked through on, because there's still more to learn from your blog. Whereas if it's a single purpose thing, You'll get served the snippet. Your brand will show up. You'll get loads of good stuff. I saw it this morning. Somebody's getting 10 to 15,000 impressions on some stuff they're doing on their website, law firm, right? Great impression levels on Google, served up all the time. I have a feeling a lot of it's snippets. They're not getting any click-throughs. And the reason they're not getting click-throughs is because there's no sense that it's more to be gained by clicking through. And I don't know if you've noticed, David, but position 3 on Google has gained a lot of traffic over the last couple of years, because what happens is that somebody who hasn't optimized the blog for that question, but they've done a related series of topics, and you know that Google loves serving related content, then answers the next question that you're going to ask, because your intent state has changed from, I didn't know the answer to how to legally write one. Now I've got another question. Oh, look, here's a blog that is actually the top 10. I'm going to click on that one instead. Have you noticed that people actually that snippets can be their own kind of worst enemies?
They can sometimes, yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, that's why it's important to put in some time and research beforehand. You know, with some terms, you need to dive in there straight away and just see, is it worth the time and effort to try and go in high on the results page for this? And sometimes it just isn't. I mean, a good example is you have a look at some search results, and they have all the ads at the top. They've got a map pack. They've got people also asked, and you're scrolling down the page before you even get to the featured snippet sometime, or at least the top 3 organic results. And that's when you really have to consider, is this the right term to spend the money, to spend the resource on, to go for? And that can sometimes be a difficult conversation to have.
I think that's, I mean, I can't share the example, firstly, because I haven't shared it with the client yet, but I've had an idea the other day. I've been so looking forward to this webinar and thinking about intent that I've started to apply it. I've thought, what is the intent of this person in this scenario? Yeah. And then I thought, it was such a crowded area. We can't inhabit that. I mean, you guess what? It'd be one of the big 4 or 5 that you know about already. But then something happened, and I just thought, aha, I know what people do in that scenario. And it's not, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to hint at the answer. It's got nothing to do with the subject matter. And it's this: my audience switches. Because the person that I'm aiming to get in front of, I can't get in front of them using usual digital marketing techniques, because they're already it's a massively crowded market.
Yeah,
I know who they're going to turn to ask the question, okay, that they want to answer. And when you suddenly get, that's the intent I need to serve. If I can get to that person and then say, well, what do they need to know in this scenario? This isn't the example in mind, so I'm going to give you a different one. But you can imagine, right? Woman working in the city, high-flying financier, finds out she's going to lose her job. Rings her husband on the mobile phone, desperately sad and sorry. She's traveling, down to, wherever they live, Guildford. And the husband's basically got an hour to think, oh my God, what's it all mean, and what are they going to do, right? They're going to ask their mates. They're going to ask their mates, what does it mean? And what, because their intent is to support, their lovely wife, and they want to do all the right things for them, right? So they want to be well informed, and what do I do, and what do I say, and how do I do them? What do I do with the kids, and how do I make this work, right? I'm talking as if we still commute, but bear with me for a minute. And that hour is a real golden hour for them to do the research and the exercise. So if you serve that person the appropriate things to be thinking about, how to counsel someone in the, frankly, personally challenging situation where they've lost their job, right? You've thought about audience, you're serving audience A by looking after audience B. That's intent marketing. It's really thinking about, how do I mean, look, I tell you what, try and rank for employment law for that area. Try and get to that woman who's just lost her job without competing with Slater and Gordon paying 55 quid per hit for an employment law PPC campaign. You just, as David says, in a limited world of budget, time, resource, energy, effort, whatever, what can you do, with that same intent? How do you repackage it and do something different? And so it was a very, very, very bright digital marketer that said to me a few weeks ago something like that, and I just thought, yeah, that is just brilliant. I need to go off down this rabbit hole instead and go a different route. And it's just thinking about what if genuinely empathizing, what would you do in that scenario? What have you already done before you got here?
Yeah.
Who's asking this question? What do they want to? What do they really want to do? Got it. They're not the person affected. They are the related party.
And I think it's interesting when it comes to the websites as well. I know I've had this conversation in the past with the thoughts of, oh, that's the content is too basic. We don't want that on our website. We're too far above that. But it's a great place to start.
Does it have to be in the
what
navigation of the
is?
site? Does it have to be in the navigation of the site? I would suggest
Yeah.
it doesn't. Right. So let's dispel a myth here quickly. And David, you can take a lead note, or I can. Doesn't matter, right? What is wrong with having Google love your site for every law firm student, every future lawyer, but every law student out there looking for let's take a silly example, Donahue and Stevenson. Everyone knows it, right? So we all studied it. And what is the harm of having the answer to or an exam crib sheet on Donahue and Stevenson on your law firm website? It's got nothing to do with the practice of law as such, but it puts your brand in front of 100,000 legal students every year, right? So there's that. You've planted the seed of the idea that your firm cares about students enough by doing something that feels so completely counter to what you're doing. And Google doesn't know the difference between a law student coming to that site and looking and checking that stuff out, or somebody who's actually going to instruct you and doing whatever. All it knows is, was their intent served? Did they come in and Google's measure of their intent? Well, did they spend enough time on that page reading it? Did they get enough value out of it? Did they share it with someone else? Did they do something afterwards? Right? So if we're serving those people, and Google loves that, it lifts the whole site up. Everything gets ranked better because we've got these pages. David's absolutely right. What is the harm of, let's take our employment law example again. That husband has got lots of questions that he's going to have to answer on behalf of his wife, and the clock's ticking. I don't know if you've noticed, but he's now down to 49 minutes he's got to answer thing, right? And he better know, because he's got to listen and deal with the emotional state and this and that. And then, we've got to find a practical way forward, right? Well, what have you committed to already? What have you said that you would do? What's expected of you next when you go to your consultation? Are you taking anyone with you? Have they allowed you to do all of the questions that we know that you're allowed to ask in relation to that consultation? He's already primed to those answers. If we serve those basic questions to someone, by the way, I don't care if that's 7 web pages or 1, right? If you do it in a way that's appropriate for you, there is no right answer. It's just an answer that's appropriate for your audience, right? If you're willing to structure things that way, Google will love you. The audience will love you. People will come across your brand who would not have come across your brand, even though they're not likely to instruct you immediately, and you won't probably ever be able to track it backwards. But there's one client said to me a while ago, I don't know what you're doing, but you must be doing it right because we're busier than we've ever been. Right? Yeah. Okay, fine. That is the job. And to David's point, it doesn't have to sit in the navigation. I don't have to have a page that says Donahue and Stevenson in the navigation of the site. I just don't, right? But do I think that I've long thought this from my days at OC and other firms, I've long thought that having a really clever exam revision program, or certainly for people doing conversion courses, really having a dedicated set of resources for them, and some online lectures for them, David. Like real
that whole, and it could almost fall under the careers section of a website.
Yeah. Well, it's your future lawyer section.
As you say, you imagine the amount of people that are looking for this information, the guidance as well. And it puts you in a good light as they move through their career as well. I think it's just it's often a missed opportunity.
It's about technically. Let's go back to the model that you and I talked about in both the 12 days of Christmas. We spoke about it in other webinars. We spoke about it on Clubhouse, but we're going to talk about AIDA again. I think it's really important to remember. It's not a perfect model, but it's a useful one for marketeers to remember, and it's a very useful one for lawyers to get to understand as well. Okay, so there are 4 stages to the buyer's journey, roughly, broadly, and you do not go through them logically as well. I mean, you just don't, right? You go all over the place, and then you wend your way through, and eventually, hopefully, you end up calling a law firm partner, or and she's able to help you because of some stuff that you've read that she's written on the website, right? So AIDA, awareness, interest, decision, and action. awareness, these early phase awareness questions, David, they're grounded in a certain type of language, right? If we think about the kind of language, the questions that people ask, because this is back to your Donald Rumsfeld, these are your known unknowns. I don't know the answer to this question, but I know there's a question to be asked about this thing.
Yeah.
Right? That's the first thing we've got to answer, is like that. We've got to say, okay, in the awareness phase, I don't know anything about, redundancy consultations. I don't know enough about redundancy consultations, but I know a first question I'd like to ask. So what might appears to be a basic question about, the notice periods and how they run. Fine, we can do all of that. That's just not where we are with this group. This group are asking a very basic question, and their intent will change as you answer every single question. And as they wend their way through the page, they're becoming a much more sophisticated buyer of that service. But what's also happening is that their loyalty to you has gone through the roof, because they came in not knowing. They just chose you because you were the top result on Google, or they chose you because a friend said go and check out X because they've got a brilliant section on this thing, or a journalist has written you up and said you should take a look at this guide over here. And we had that when I was at Purchase Salmon. Some of our hits, thousands of hits, because they're just included in press copy because it's a trusted source of information. It's just a mine, right? But if we're answering those awareness questions, it comes to a stage where our language changes into signaling interest. So it moves from what questions a lot of the time, David. What is this? Why do I? Those big 30,000-foot questions. When they start moving to the interest phase, they signal interest with, "Oh, how do I
implement it? Now I know what it is."
There's a transition, and I think that we don't see enough of that in professional services marketing. The transition language. By the way, you know this. You don't have to have it on separate pages, but it should be structured so that the journey is a natural one for people to take. Now, if you structure it on a single page, and David is correct when he says use structured data, you can do some very clever things to allow people to be brought straight into certain parts of pages. But they think, well, I'm not quite there yet, but they can scroll back. Oh, I understand now. Right? You can do some very clever things up and down a page on a web page.
And Google's getting smarter with it as well.
It is, and because only thing it cares about is user intent, right? It wants to make sure it serves people the right information in a timely fashion so they can act on it, right? And so it gets, the reason it owns 90% of the market is because it's trusted by people to give them the right answer every time. And the only way it's going to do that is by giving them the right answer every time. So if we don't turn up to Google's game of football and try and play rugby. It's just pointless. Turn up to Google's game having learned the rules of football properly and play along properly. So, David, as that intent changes and moves from an awareness to an interest phase, right? You know this. You've structured these things much better than I ever have over the years. We know that the language changes, the questions that are asked. And then as we move to the decision phase, the language changes again, because what happens is people are starting to get a little bit confronted. They might actually have to instruct you.
Yeah.
So what do salespeople talk about? It's objections. Well, how can you show me? And this is really, really careful here. They're going to come up with questions in their head that you've got to answer without putting those questions on the page, right? You'll lose them. So how do I know that I can trust you? How do I know that you're better than your competitors? This is where marketers have got to map out these big pages.
And I'll tell you, there's one question that's often missed out as well, and that's around what to expect when I do walk into your office.
Yeah.
Because especially around some of those more personal legal issues, this is somebody who has never dealt with a law firm before, and perhaps they've got to go into the office. What should I expect of that initial conversation? So yeah, I think that comes into the journey as well.
An unmet need. You're so clever. You're better at this than I am, right? You're serving an unmet need, but it's because you listen, right? Yeah. You think you're willing to empathize with that person's intent and their unspoken truth about it. It's like, well, what are they signaling to you? Why are they dropping off this page at this point, Simon?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is because we haven't demonstrated any value to them. We haven't proven to them that we can do it. We haven't shown them people who look and sound like them trusting us, right? So adverts, think about it. Adverts are done, and they're all people who look and sound like us, so that we then think, oh, I can trust that brand. Now, if we do more of that in our law firm marketing, and please do not confuse me with talking about B2C law firm marketing here. I'm not. I'm talking about all law firm marketing needs to have some form of empathy at that break point on the decision phase. It doesn't matter if you're a blue-blooded investment banker or somebody who's instructing on a personal injury claim. There's nothing wrong with either of those client bases, by the way. You need to meet their need for validation that they're choosing the right firm by addressing that intent that they've got at that stage. My intent has changed. I understand the problem. I understand that you're able to deal with some of these things. Why should I choose you? Right? Their intent has changed. And then to the last phase, action. We see this all the time, David, and you're much more of a world expert than I am with these things. But flipping people's intent at that point in time, it's got 15 buttons on the page. There's 12 partners and there's 12 associates. And it's like, what is the action intent they want to do? They just want to contact someone, or better still, they want someone to call them, right? So serve their intent. Or do they? Maybe not. Maybe the intent is actually something completely different. Maybe the intent is sign me up to your newsletter. If you don't know who they are yet, that's probably the appropriate thing to do, right? Because you can keep, nudging and get them further along the process.
I think as well, another important thing to remember is, we talk about the user trying to get the information to solve the problem. One other important thing to remember with this is, and this is probably more towards the B2B legal area, is the person doing the research might not be the person who's going to end up using the information.
Yes.
So if an office junior or somebody who is going to be searching for collating the information to then hand over to a partner to review, it's another side of that intent to bear in mind as well.
I had the absolute joy of working for this brilliant lawyer. I don't know if he's still there at Simmons & Simmons, called Darren Fox. He was genuinely like a once in a generation kind of partner, right? His area of expertise is in handling hedge fund managers' requests. Can you imagine how timely those requests have got to be?
Yeah.
They will put, or whatever it is, sell on things on the basis of his information within a 5 or 10 minute time frame, right? And what he did was devise this idea for hedge funds that they would know what they could do in terms of their marketing efforts across about 35 jurisdictions. And it was a subscription model, drop in the ocean for most hedgies, that the information was critical for them. They need to know, though, there was a section for the lawyers, and it's like a 40-page country report, David, on what they could. It was constantly kept up to date, what they could and couldn't do. But they had a tear sheet version for the sales guy, the actual hedge fund guy, right? So, or gal, right? And they each audience was served with precisely what they needed. He was, this is in 08. They'd set it up by then, so it must have been 07 they'd done it, right? Amazing that he'd seen the intent of what he needed, served it in a way that was appropriate for both audiences, and said to the GC, you read this, but hand this to the other person. So I took a lot from that in terms of my, in a lot of the marketing that we did at OC and the stuff that we did for the recruitment team. I said, you always think of your audience, all these, we've had them last week, haven't we? All these people applying for VAC schemes. It's a big bump in law firm traffic last week because of all of the VAC scheme applications and all the people checking out sites at last minute. Don't leave it to the last minute, guys. Bad idea. But what I worked out is there's another audience that needs serving there, which is the parents.
Yeah.
Because your parents care about, if you're invested in your career and they know what you're doing, they're going to go looking. Well, you might as well look after them as well. How do I help my child choose their long list of the firms that they might apply for on these things? So we started serving that audience. Up the wazoo, David. It went crazily well, because we just thought, we can't beat Clifford Chance's massive machine at doing VAC scheme or A&Os or whoever's, right? They're all brilliant on the stuff. And we were this, old and venerable institution with a kind of entrepreneurial heart, but we had to do some stuff differently. So we just started looking for different audiences. That's one of the things that we did. And it worked. And we made it very sticky. We used a retargeting campaign when that was something that other firms just weren't doing. And we kept dragging parents and their kids. So we put the time frame from Boxing Day right?
Yeah.
Everyone would be at home, be logged onto a desktop using family computers, right? And then there was a time frame of 10 or 12 days where we just hit this campaign. So then parents would go on the machine, they'd be served with all these flipping remarketed ads when Knowledge Panel didn't exist on Google.
Yeah.
Ads on the right hand side. Took all these massive ads. So I think we spent 1,200 quid and got like, I don't know, 250,000. But I think we worked out that 5 people actually got employed through that campaign from retargeting.
Excellent. Yeah.
It's all about intent, isn't it? About the audience and thinking about what are they thinking about, and doing, frankly, what we're doing, a bit of a confab. There's no right answers to that stuff.
You know, that's something I was going to touch on. A couple of the law firms and one of the bigger ones I've worked with, one of the biggest issues we had was siloing within the firm, and it was pretty desperate. It was partners a few doors down from each other had little awareness of what the other one was doing. But I think, that's one of the areas that perhaps marketing and BD need to dive into more. Spend time with people, understand what are the questions that you are being asked. What do people ask you when they phone up? What do they ask when they sit down in front of you? What do they ask halfway through? And then what do they ask at the end? There is so much information that can be picked up, very easily, just internally as well as externally as well.
I can't remember what the example was that popped into my head then, but I know what it was. I saw that Mark Ritson had written this week that he felt that Jeff Bezos, what he'd done so well at Amazon, was listen to the client all the time and do exactly what the client wanted all the time, consistently over time. Now, look, Amazon's got tax, employee, whatever issues as well. I'm not going to get into any of that, but we can't deny that it has consistently attempted to improve the service of its client base. Well, what started out as let's not forget, for any youngsters on the call as well, that it was a bookseller online that has become like the world's largest retailer, certainly most valuable. 1.7 trillion, I heard the value was the other day as well, right? So
thinking back to what it was in 96 is terrifying.
So the rigor with which they were willing to do every single moment, at every single stage, to address your intent and your need. Have you tried to return something, David, on their services? Right. So I did this thing, and it's can you? I wanted to return an item. I think they delivered 2, or just by accident, right? And I wanted to give them the other one back. So I went in. And I said, how do I return it? Of course, I asked Google, how do I return this thing? And then it takes you straight to the right Amazon page, because someone at Amazon has thought about my intent. And they're like, how do you do this? And then I click on it, and it's basically a 4-step guide. There's no guide at all. There's just the things that you do.
Yeah.
By the time I clicked the 4th one to ask someone to call me back to do something, the phone was ringing.
Yeah.
Right. From Ireland, because that's where they're based, their kind of call center and network center. I was like, I can't believe. I mean, it's so joined up in a way, and I think that professional services is amazing at a whole load of things, but on some of that granular stuff to do with intent, you could make massive inroads. I'm not talking about digital for a minute. I'm talking about the things that we do that make iteratively small but huge feeling differences on the audience side, when we just treat people like David says. If you've got somebody who wants to get divorced, I mean, they're already frightened and scared and worried, they haven't slept very well, and maybe they're not eating very well, and they've got kids to worry about and this and that, and then they come into your daunting what it Rich Simmons calls them, lilied white chair, white tiled offices, and it's quite awful for those of us who walk through those receptions every day. We think it's just normal, but we didn't feel like that at first. It's normalized. So that person's intent needs serving. It's okay that our lawyer will happily meet you in a cafe to talk about it if that's easier, or whatever we will do. I think there are things there that we could just all do on the client experience side that would serve intent better as well.
I think it's the consideration of the understanding and ultimately the delight especially with something, as you mentioned, the divorce side, if you can make that whole interaction as simple, as easy, as almost thoughtless as possible, especially through a difficult, tricky time like that, you delight people. And that's when the proper word of mouth, they'll be saying, well, look, I had this fabulous experience, and they start drawing people back. And I think that's the ultimate goal, to delight the clients at the end of the
Must
day.
reduce serving that intent really well for that initial client must reduce your cost of acquisition just through the floor. I mean, it's minimal. What does it take to stay in touch with that person who loved you so much, and remind them that you're extending your service, you're deepening your service, you're whatever? What does it take to actually write to them, send them a Christmas card? I don't know if you know, David, but the amount of instructions you get after Christmas cards is huge.
Well, I mean, we're one of the larger law firms. There was an incident there, and we had to get in touch with clients to let them know.
Right.
And it was, of course, something that we didn't do on a general basis.
Yeah.
And it was amazing the amount of work that came out of that. I mean, I remember talking to some of the juniors and saying, just invite people. We were in the city, in London. Invite people out for a coffee. Say, hey, lunchtime, how about a catch up for 10 minutes? Just buy a coffee, have a chat. It goes a long way. It really does.
So that, if I'm slightly mindful of the time, we're going to finish in about 3 minutes or so, but I think that we're good at identifying that target audience, and people are getting much better at that as well now. If you're not at that stage yet, then intent's going to be really useful for you to get there, because actually you'll start discerning, wait a minute, if I can serve the intent from this, what am I really trying to get this person to do, or what am I trying to do for them? Let's put the service back in professional services. Then actually identifying the audience that's asking that question will become a bit easier. Right? Nothing wrong with a bit of specialization, because it will attract people to it. Right?
Absolutely.
If someone can see themselves in the questions and the way that you're dealing with something, I'm careful not to say it's just digital, because it's not. But if it's a webinar or an event or an art event or a religious event or whatever it might be, right? If someone can see themselves in that thing and they think that serves me, then they will like to come along to it. So don't be afraid to narrow the field a bit, but make it mean more to that person with a bit of kind of intent marketing as well.
That's a great place to start. I tell you, we're up for time now, so we'll wrap this up and we'll say goodbye. Thank you to everyone who's been watching us live today. Thank you to everyone who's watching us on the recorded version as well. I'm David Sayce, digital marketing and SEO consultant. This is Simon Marshall. And Simon, do you want to say any words before you go? How can people get in touch with you?
Go have a play with it. Go and have some fun with it. And the next time that you're making a buying decision, notice your intent and how it changes throughout the process. Think about how to bring that back to what you're doing on the marketing side of things.
Excellent advice, as always. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Simon. And until next time, take care.